And welcome back to the Touchline Talk show. We are going to jump right in here with the Serie A season preview. First, got to recap the summer biggest developments during the transfer window. Notable arrivals outside of, Romelu Lukaku. We've already talked about that. Charlotte de la Catalara has moved from Club Brugge to AC Milan. It's a fun name to say. De Catalara, I believe is how you pronounce it. Did some research earlier today. Attacking midfielder, really good creative player. Plenty of the bigger teams in Europe wanted him. AC Milan gets his signature. Juventus, reloading to a certain extent. Bremer comes across from Torino, one of the best defenders in the league last season, to replace Matthias de Ligt. Paul Pogba, of course, joins Angel Di Maria. Paul Dybala is out the door. This is basically, for the most part, just kind of replacing one guy with another. You got the center backs in. Dybala leaves. Pogba comes in. Di Maria will give you something. But these names are huge. There's plenty of turnover there, so they're going to be one of the most interesting teams. They're also, of course, just Juventus, so they're naturally interesting. But a lot of changes at Juve this summer. And then Roma, coming off of a very solid end of last season. Paulo Dybala, probably saw the pictures. If not, check them out. His unveiling was otherworldly. And Nemanja Matic comes as well. Again, both free transfers to good pieces of business for Roma there. Other team I wanted to mention real quickly in terms of rivals, Atalanta has gone and just started picking away from other Serie A teams. Jeremy Boga, Ederson, Mira Demiral, all coming from inside the league as Atalanta tries to rebound from a really difficult season. Departures-wise, Napoli, the list is longer than this, but your most notable departees, of course, Kalidou Koulibaly going to Chelsea, Lorenzo Insigne is in Toronto, Dries Mertens has left the club, as has David Ospina. Those are four guys who have been vital to sort of the identity of this Napoli team over the past 5 to 10 years. This is very much turning the page into a new era for Napoli. We'll see how things go. That's an awful lot of talent that walked out the door. Sassuolo lose two promising players that we've already talked about. One of them, Jeremy Boga, going to Atalanta. And again, this is also the club that Gianluca Scamacca came from for West Ham. Really fun team to watch, Sassuolo. Going to have to rebuild a little bit in attack, but we are going to talk about them a little bit later for a specific reason. And then the other notable departure I wanted to mention, Noel Molina, right back going to Atletico Madrid from Udinese. So that's kind of your mid-table guy you may not have heard of who's now at a big club getting that big move. Those are the most prominent moves I wanted to highlight to sort of set the scene for our storylines. The first storyline, very simply, the dominance of the two Milan teams. Does it continue? Does anybody come close to touching them? Can Juventus actually get back into this equation? Or are we going to go Inter versus AC Milan for the third year in a row? And then also the second part of this, I talked about this after AC Milan won the league, but what is the gap between these two teams? Are we going to get a toe-to-toe race? Because they've gone back and forth the past two seasons, but it kind of sputtered in the final weeks of the season where you knew what direction this thing was headed. Now you have the champion AC Milan team, albeit one that lost Frank Kessié, and a Romelu Lukaku Inter team. Which in my head means they are almost dead even. AC Milan improved last season. Inter took a step back. Inter add Lukaku, which puts them right back in there. So it's sort of twofold here. Of, are we doing this again, and are we going to get an even tighter title race than the last two seasons, which have been exciting? They just haven't gone down to the very last, game where you don't know what is going to happen. And of course, we don't get those very often. So you got to treasure every single one that you do get, like we saw in the Premier League last season, and like I think we very well could get in Serie A this year. Second headline. If you're going to assume the two Milan teams are in the top three, and Juventus is also in the top three, you got that fourth spot. And this is where things get really interesting for me. This was Napoli. And then we just went through all of the players Napoli has lost. They're not going to fall off the face of the earth. And they do have some wiggle room because they were part of that title race for a good portion of last season. Clearly the third best team in the league. But do they even have enough now to stay and hold on to fourth? And you start looking at some of the teams that are going to be knocking on their door. Roma are just all the good vibes right now, coming off of the Conference League title. Already got Dybala in. Apparently they're close to landing both Andrea Bellotti and Gigi Wijnaldum. We'll see if those moves come to fruition. But all of a sudden, it's a team with a proven goal scorer in Tammy Abraham, plenty of talent around him, and Jose Mourinho. If I have to pick, they're the team finishing fourth right now. The other two teams I wanted to highlight. Lazio are always around. Usually they're sort of on the short end of the stick when it comes to the big teams in Italy. But maybe everything doesn't click for Roma. It can always implode with Mourinho. Napoli are going to take a step back. There is an opportunity here for Lazio to claim that fourth spot. And then the other team I'm really, really curious about is Atalanta. Atalanta stopped scoring goals last season, and so they fell off the face of the earth, relatively speaking, to what they had been the past couple seasons. They are not changing the way they play. They are going to concede a lot of goals, which means if they don't score boatloads, they are in big trouble. And that is what happened last season. Can they get the train back on the tracks? Because they were qualified for the Champions League when I would argue it was more difficult in terms of 1 through 4 working your way in there. I'm looking at this season saying there is a spot there for the taking. Can they get to the level of, say, a Roma? Can they get back to anything close to what they have been recently? Really, there's one team I am most interested in Italy. It is Atalanta. And then third, I just wanted to highlight this in terms of some of the most productive players in this league not playing for its top teams. Ciro Immobile won another Golden Boot. Of course, he's at Lazio. He scores 20 to 30 goals a season. Is spectacular. Just you can basically bank it at the beginning of the season. If he stays healthy, that's what he's going to do. So he's arguably your best pure goal scorer in the league. Domenico Berardi, 15 goals, 14 assists. That was his league high, by the way, the 14 assists. Still at Sassuolo. I talked about how fun they are to watch, and that yes, they're going to rebuild a little bit, but they didn't lose all their attack. And the player with the most goal involvements per 90 minutes last season, that was Luis Murillo at Atalanta. It is just kind of fascinating because you look at this and, okay, Lautaro Martinez had a big season for Inter, in large part because Lukaku wasn't there anymore. But you're going to expect one of those Inter strikers to be right up there at the top of the league statistically this season. But that AC Milan team, interchangeable pieces at striker, goals from all over the place. Maybe Vlahovic becomes that guy for Juventus, but it was just sort of a weird season where you didn't have the top statistical players. You look at the Premier League, and who is it? It's Kane, it's Son, it's De Bruyne, it's Lewandowski in the Bundesliga, it's Karim Benzema in La Liga. But it just seems like Serie A, there are some stars who, and Lorenzo Insigne is a perfect example of this too. Of course, he's been on some really good Napoli teams, but he never moved to Juventus. He never moved to one of the Milan clubs. There are just these guys who stick around at clubs, it seems like, longer than they should in terms of the talent level they have and the production they're giving you. And so we're going to get to, and I'm bad about this too, of just turning on a random Serie A game. But you can find some of the most productive, most talented players in the league without watching AC Milan, Inter, Juventus. Napoli's going to have to find some different players to produce this season. So it's one of the things that sets Serie A apart for me. So I wanted to highlight it real quickly as one of our storylines.